A pleasure to meet all at last. And so, today it's March 15th, 2025. As you probably know by now, there's been a good handful of different first impression videos that I have made throughout this whole year. But let's just say that since Sniper Elite Resistance came and went, I haven't really done much for the series. But I'm gonna more than make up for that, because after all, in early February, I went on ahead and made a big promo at what was my latest installment in the First Impression series, Sniper Elite Resistance. But since then, not much in February has occurred otherwise. Although there were, of course, the releases of a few other titles out there, one of which was, of course, Monster Hunter Wilds. Yeah, this is Capcom's latest installment in the Monster Hunter series, which circumnavigates a hunter who fights a bunch of monsters, mainly as a means of establishing alliances with villages and as a rite of passage, alongside a small cat friend known as a Palico. Basically, a bit of a take on a Calico by Capcom themselves. In the case of Wilds, though, it does roll off in a bit differently. And if you're familiar at all with how Monster Hunter originally gave us that unique vibe of hunting monsters, RPG leveling up, a progression, a map system, and loads of items to keep or give away, not to mention the many different ways to customize your own in-game avatar and your Palico, well, Wilds does things a bit differently here. At first, we're basically thrown into, let's say, 3 minutes worth of options. Yeah, a lot of these are the basic things, including brightness modes, colorblind settings. Yeah, this is definitely one of those big games with a lot of complexities put in. But when we finally get to the main title screen, and then the opening cutscenes, they center around a group of people underground. A girl gets separated from the rest of her family, and then we're off to some sort of flying ship in the middle of the desert. But as it turns out, our in-game hunter has to be created. Yeah, because basically when we go into the innards of the ship, that's where the idea of the hunter and the Palico come in. And so this does prompt us players to create our own exact avatar to our own liking. Now, for the most part, while I have gone on to create more original characters, plenty of instances I have chosen to create my own in-game avatar based on my own image, or at least to the best that I can put it together. And well, Jay Nowak is essentially the name that I had given to the avatar, and as for the Palico, well, I had him colorized in a certain way, and actually had him named after one of our crew members, Noland. You might have heard the name many different times, but I might as well make it clear. He's a kind-hearted old man whom has been quite a lot of help in Kaiju Force Neo. He was responsible, after all, for organizing a number of things on the channel. Lots of promotions went down, mainly with his own money being put in for the budget. Remember how big Sniper Elite Resistance got and all the impressions and subscribers I got out of that alone? Well, that was mostly thanks to him putting $100 on the line. Anyways, though, both the hunter and the Palico exit the ship, only to find the girl whom is unfortunately being attacked by giant sandworms. These creatures that are coming out of the sands are indeed big trouble. Believe it or not, we actually do have to fight them at some point, but within the few hours of the game that I've already played so far, there's already a lot worth talking about. Because after you rescue the girl known as Nada, she in fact does become a helpful asset. As the hunter, Nada, as well as Alma, whom is basically your guide to understanding the monster species that you fight up against, and whom accompanies you on your many trips, they all head back to camp. This camp especially contains everything you possibly need. You have your own forge, for instance, and the Smitty herself is more than willing to help you create whatever kinds of armor and weapons you need, as well as things for the Palico. I'd say beginning to pick things for Nolan, going from winter gear and bone weapons to drills and malachite armor, yeah. It's a pretty unique way to not only customize these in-game characters, but also allow for a variety of weapons to be put together. In fact, Monster Hunter Wilds probably does have a big selection of weaponry, more so than what the others have shown us so far. For instance, we could talk a bit about the Great Sword, which is an insanely long blade in comparison to other bladed weapons that we've got in the game. There, of course, are the bow guns, which are some of the only ranged weapons that you can put together. And while you do initially get a pretty big deal of ammo, I'll admit, the copy of the game that I got was the deluxe edition, and it came with a lot of pre-loaded extras. A lot of supplies are added in at first, and because of my subscription to PlayStation Plus, I was able to get a couple of packs for free as well. So I was more than ready to take on most of the monsters in hand. Not only bullets for the bow guns, but there were also rations, barrel bombs, shriekers, basically a good bunch of different supplies that you need for your many journeys out into the wilderness. After all, these wild wilderness zones that are all the way out there, from beyond the camp and to many other places that you explore, are chock full of different creatures. While a majority of which are docile and don't plan on attacking you, there's a good bunch that do come into contact with you. Probably one of the most infamous in the entire game that I'd have to mention is the Dogashuna. Yeah. But then of course there come the loads of different creatures that I might as well mention. A giant monkey who farts on you. Talk about being funny. Or there's even a ginormous spider. I might as well mention that arachnid safe mode happens to be a more common occurrence nowadays. Remember Grounded, for instance? That game does in fact feature an arachnid safe mode, so that way any of those who are arachnophobic probably won't get to encounter the spiders in the game. While in Monster Hunter Wilds, we get more or less of the same thing. Exposure to spider or arachnid-like creatures that could indeed become the boss. And so far, having beaten a good 3 bosses worth, I'd say, while the Dogashunas, I'd say they are probably going to be some of the worst we'd encounter. One might expect them to be, let's say, the final boss of the entire game. I probably have yet to determine that, because having only a few hours worth of playtime doesn't really mean that I'm going to get all that far in. But hey, at least a lot of the other elements are there. You have the RPG elements, which allow for leveling up. You have many items out there, from healing to food. You have many people to talk to, characters to interact with. And probably my most favorite trope at the moment would probably be the fact that every time that you reload the game, you restart, well, the title screen in fact showcases a first-person perspective of your own avatar waking up out of bed and enjoying some coffee, with the likes of your Palico and Alma accompanying you by your side in the tent. Talk about a bit of a wholesome moment there. The fact that your characters in the game, alongside your own self, they're by your side, no matter what happens. And I'd say in that spirit, we have ourselves quite the contender here. But I do have yet to play through a lot of the game. I've heard that there's going to be so much more to Monster Hunter Wilds, and I honestly can't wait to continue further on this one. In any case though, at the moment, I'll just give this one an 8.8 out of 10.1. While I will say that Monster Hunter and Monster Hunter Iceborne, they both held up in their own unique way, and Capcom was able to do a lot of things with these titles. Wilds sure was another big step in this direction of exploring the wilderness, forging and wielding all kinds of weapons and armor, and taking on even the most terrifying of creatures the wilderness has to offer. So they definitely did way more with this title than the others so far. But maybe a lot of things will change. If I go any further on the game to, let's say, 20 hours of gameplay, then maybe I could resurface on this topic and talk about it some more. Until then though, I will say that I'll be pretty busy in terms of first impression videos. 2 more, in fact, I'll be making. On March 20th, for instance, I do plan on covering another new title which came out a couple weeks ago, known as 2 Point Museum, the latest installment in the 2 Point series. So stay tuned for that piece. And of course, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.